We've had a lot of requests for comparisons of today's micro compacts and small pistols. I don't like doing them for a lot of reasons. However, there are some things that I think should be addressed and you should be made aware of. So coming up next on GBGuns, we're going to take a look at some of these most requested guns, and I'm going to try to help you figure out which one might be right for you. By and large, the three most contested, at least at the moment of this filming, are these three right here. Thank goodness for large hands. I can fit three in one hand, sort of. We've got the Springfield Hellcat, the Canik METE MC9, and the Sig P365. However, there were some other guns that people have mentioned and asked for. And that's these three right here, which are not going to be in this comparison, and I'll tell you why. First off, the Mossberg MC2C, excellent pistol. We love this, and all of these guns, of course, have complete reviews on the channel. But this is a compact. It's not a micro compact. It's maybe subcompact. I mean, it's super slim, but it is not in the same size category, making it not really a fair comparison. The next in that batch is the Smith & Wesson Equalizer. This, I feel the same way as the MC2C. It's not really a micro compact. It's a bit bigger of a gun. You can see it's size-wise much closer to the Mossberg. So this isn't really, these two could be compared, but comparing either of these against the micro compacts is not really fair. And lastly is the Smith & Wesson CSX. This is a micro compact, but it's hammer fired, and quite frankly, we had such a terrible time with this thing that I don't even want to toss it in as a suggestion or comparison. It's kind of its own animal, stands on its own. And if you're into that, well, more power to you. Let's get on to the main event. These are the three that everyone's asking about. The 365, the Hellcat, and the MC9. Now before I get into this, when it comes to size, those numbers are published everywhere. You can look them up and see the actual hard numbers for yourself. Please don't ever look at size comparisons from a video. Reason for that being, the angle at which someone holds something to the camera can change perspective quite a bit. The focal distance of the lens can change perspective quite a bit. It's too easy to get a false impression from a camera lens. If you want to know numbers, you can look at numbers. There's no point in me busting out charts for you guys to see that. Obviously, you're intelligent enough to have found that information from the manufacturer rather than taking it from a YouTube channel. So let's talk about what numbers can't talk about, and that is shoot. Starting with the OG, the original Sig P365. This is an early ported SAS model. We don't have one of the more modern ones. However, the size, dimensions, and features are all pretty much the same. What was exciting about this, of course, was the capacity of 10+1 in something so small that it usually is on the line with or in line with the pocket pistol size. I would not recommend carrying any of these in a pocket, at least not without a holster. But that's what made these things so exciting. They went really small, really small. As you can see with my finger straight, I am nearly at the muzzle. And even with the pinky rest magazine in here, my XXL hand, I get less than half of a third finger on there, which makes them kick off under recoil if I'm not careful. Fortunately, this is the ported model that helps balance some things quite a bit. When it comes to texture, now of course this being a chassis system and modular, you can swap out these grip modules very easily, as well we can no longer show on YouTube. But it's easy to do. We've tried lots of different modules, so even this design of this module is maybe not current, but the texturing all the way around is nice. Smooth under here to aid in a grab, so you don't get caught up on the draw. Controls, of course, within reach, because what isn't on a gun this small? You do have a proprietary rail system. This wants you to use SIG type lights and lasers if you're going to try to do that. Now of course you can swap grip modules to one that has a rail on it. Everything is pretty darn small, and for me what makes this gun a challenge is being able to hold on to the whole thing. It is a lot of firepower in a very small package. However, it's not the most pleasant to shoot, and part of that is because it's so small and so light. Got to remember that carry guns are a compromise from a regular pistol, which is a compromise from getting to a rifle. When you go small and light, you're doing so to make it easier to carry, but you're sacrificing the same characteristics that would make something more enjoyable on the range. Checking clear, and to go through trigger talk a little bit, the trigger on the 365 comes to immediate resistance, short travel, and a decent length reset that brings you right back to that wall. This time it creeps, and this is something that I've noticed with the SIGs, is the triggers aren't necessarily consistent. Not in a, oh my gosh, I can't predict this gun, it's not something I want to shoot kind of way, but 365 to 365, 320 to 320, they all tend to feel a little bit different. I don't know if it's how many rounds have been through them, or if it's just tolerances in the assembly process of those chassis. But I will say, if you get a chance to try the trigger on two unfired guns side by side, do it before you pick one for purchase, because they can be a little different. All of our SIGs shoot a little bit differently. Does it really matter? No, not that much. Does it really matter for a carry gun? No, not that much either. But what you should be aware of is the way this feels. Wall, little creep, break, moderate reset, right back to the wall before the creep, and break again. So not an inappropriate carry for trigger, trigger for carry as far as weight or pull. It's a gun that is definitely ready to shoot. But overall, if you're looking at this SAS model, I don't even think they make anymore, but I believe they now have optics ready models. I believe they now have railed models, but this is the smallest of the batch. Stepping up slightly larger, and once again, sorry, camera angle and all that can make a difference, but I can show you where you can really see the difference. If we go muzzle to muzzle, you can see that the slide is a little bit longer on the Hellcat, and if I stack these, you can see that the grip is also a little bit longer and the trigger guard a little bit larger, because this trigger system is a little more complex. When the Hellcat came out, it took the SIG capacity and added 1, so you've got 11 plus 1. With the pinky rest on here, my XXL hands don't quite line up with these finger grooves, which can be a frustration. I know Glock shooters know what I'm talking about, but I do get half of my third finger on the gun. The texture on the Hellcat is excellent. It kind of holds you back. It almost feels a little bit sticky. And you have memory points here for indexing your thumb and indexing your trigger finger when not on the trigger. We have a single rail slot. This one is not optics ready. I don't know if they have models now that are. If you guys know, go ahead and let us know in the comments. You also get a window to know if there's a loaded chamber or not. These windows are better than nothing. However, the problem I find with them is it usually takes me so much time to get enough light in there to see around that I might as well just check in the chamber to begin with. As far as trigger, this is a flat-ish type. The 365s are also available with a flat trigger in the X models. And you have a safety dingus in the middle, which the 365 does not offer. We've got spring tensioned take up to a wall. Heavy, thick wall of a brake. Resets decent, takes us right back to that wall again. So this trigger, to me, feels heavier. The wall is less defined. It feels like a safer trigger for carry, perhaps, depending on your skill level and training, etc. But it's definitely one that makes it a little bit tougher to shoot if you're going to be out there trying to shoot groups. Now, as far as spending range time, the Hellcat can be more pleasant in that it fits and works with the hand better, plus you've got like these dimples and some other things added in there. However, it's still not known to be the greatest on the range per se. And as I showed you, we have a slight increase in overall size and weight. If that's a big deal to you, I don't know what to tell you. Stepping up in size once again by just a little bit is the new Canik METE MC9. And let's stick to the hard facts here. If I go muzzle to muzzle here, and you can see breech face to breech face, you can see that the Canik's slide is a little bit longer. However, that provides you this optics ready slot and a physical tactile loaded chamber indicator that pops up when there's a round in the chamber. The grip profile is a little bit different. One of the things that you get on the MC9 that you don't on the other two are these interchangeable back straps, which certainly do make a difference. Show you another interesting feature here is with the pinky rest magazine in there, my XXL hands, I'm getting 2.5. I'm getting about as full of a grip as I did on the Hellcat. Somehow for me it feels a little better on the Canik. You do not have memory points like you do on the Hellcat. However, with the rail slot there, that's what we used. I buried my thumb into the rail and stick my finger up there on the rail. You're getting ambidextrous controls, and that the slide stop, slide lever is on both sides. It is not on the Hellcat, and certainly not on the 365. This is also the widest part of the gun. So when it comes to people arguing about the total width of the gun, they're measuring here. It's not necessarily that the whole gun is fatter, it's just thicker where you've got those ambi controls. Reversible magazine release is small and a different shape and texture than the rest of the Canik line. Speaking of magazines, one of the things that we really liked about the MC9 and don't care for on the Hellcat or 365 is the ease of loading the magazines. This is the same tube design that Canik uses on their full-size pistols. So if you've ever loaded a Canik mag, you know that it feels like your standard double-stack mag. That includes this guy. Nice thing about that is it's much more comfortable and much easier to load these magazines. So if you're going to be spending a lot of range time or going for training, I would go with these, this model and these mags. Also, this MC9 can accept regular full-size Canik magazines, which is pretty cool. If you're a Canik guy, that means you've already got some mags laying around, and you can use those to plus up for the sake of a training session, etc. We have 3 rail slots instead of 1 or none. And as I already showed you, a loaded chamber indicator that pops up there and red dot ready. You also have a striker status indicator on the back here. That red dot pops out when the striker is armed and it disappears when the striker has been tripped. That gives you an idea of status of the gun. Since it's not a decockable gun, does that really matter? Maybe, I don't know. It's just one more nice thing to see. As far as trigger feel, this is much more of the Canik style trigger than the other two, of course, because it's a Canik gun. But what I mean by that is we have a partially pre-cocked trigger, and so the pull, we have little resistance to a wall, brakes all the way at the back, and a reset. It's very short. Very short total travel. That makes this the most eager to fire, if you will. Might be something you want to take into considerations based on your skill level and self-confidence with a trigger. They did add some weight to this trigger versus the, say, TP9 SFX or any of their bigger guns, so it's a little more appropriate for carry and pull. While we're here, you notice the trigger guard is rather small on the MC9. I had a lot of people asking questions about that. My take on it is, if it's cold enough outside for you to have gloves so thick that you can't get in here, then it's cold enough outside for you to be carrying something bigger than a micro compact. Right? If you've got big bulky gloves on, you've probably got a big jacket on, and that means you can carry a bigger gun. I understand budget constraints and things like that, but really these things are ideal for light clothing carry to begin with. If you live in a climate where you're wearing lots of heavy layers, then I don't see much need for such a tiny gun. We have texturing on the front strap, or the front of the trigger guard, which we did not on the other two, despite the Springfield being a European gun. They didn't go with that there. But if you like to shoot that way, or if you find that on guns this small it helps you control, that gives you a little bit of traction. The texture on here is from the METE line, which grips rather nicely and is all the way around the gun, minus up here, so that you don't end up with snag or slow down on your draw when you go to grab the gun. Same feature as the other two. Otherwise, between the three, it's been our experience that the Canik is the most shootable, most enjoyable to shoot. It is also larger and slightly heavier than the other two, only slightly, but that size and weight is what makes them more shootable. So when it comes to trying to figure out which of these three you think is ideal for you, it really comes down to what your use is. I've many a time in declining doing comparisons like this tried to tell folks it's a lot like cars. You look at any parking lot and you are unlikely to see more than a couple of the exact same make, model, and year, and that's because we all have different budgets, we all have different needs, personal tastes, and concepts of what we need to do with our vehicle. That's why there are so many makes and models of cars out there. That's why we all have something different. The handgun world is the same way, and I would say it's just as important to find a good fit for you with a pistol as it is with an automobile. We've all had that car that we wish we didn't have for one reason or another. We've all envied a different car for one reason or another. The same thing happens with the pistols. Don't let anybody tell you that any one gun is the absolute answer for everything. Just like no one car is the absolute answer for everything. I'd like to hear your observations in the comments section, as well as any additional questions that you guys have, and Miss T and I will do our best to answer them as we see them. Thanks for watching.